From the Weston A. Price Foundation, welcome to the Wise Traditions Podcast for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health. And now here is our host and producer, Hilda Labrada Gore.
Hey, Hilda here. Have you looked up in the sky recently, only to see cloud-like stripes or streaks that don't seem to dissipate but expand more into a haze? Are these condensation trails or jet fuel exhaust or something else altogether? This is episode 474, and our guest today is Matt Landman. Matt is the man behind the documentary Frankenskies. He's also a leader of grassroots activism, bringing awareness to issues related to geoengineering and weather modification programs, among other environmental concerns. Today, Matt expounds on all things related to what's happening in our skies. He talks about how much the government spends on weather manipulation, for example. He points out that there has also been a lot of flip-flopping on the subject. At first, the government admitted that they were cloud seeding and experimenting with such things. Later, they said it was simply a conspiracy theory. And now they admit to it but say that it's necessary to counter global warming. Learn more as Matt dives into this geoengineering agenda that he reminds us affects every single person on the planet. Before we get into the conversation, remember to follow this podcast on the platform of your choice. That way you don't miss a thing. Or better yet, download our Wise Traditions podcast app. It's available on iOS and Android devices. This is Hilda Labrada Gore, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Matt.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on.
I can't help but look up at the skies in the morning. I like to get the morning sunrise, and I'm often surprised and perplexed by what I will call stripes in the sky that don't seem to dissipate, but seem to expand to the point where they make it look like a hazy day very, very often. Like, when did you first realize that something unusual was happening in the skies?
Yes, and that's great that you like to look up. It's important to look up, and that's the first step to the truth, it seems. And my story is I walked a pretty normal, quote unquote, path. I never thought I'd become an activist. I never thought it'd be my career and my passion and all these things. I am now 43 years old. And when I was 33 years old, I knew nothing of this. And at around that time, I had worn many hats, had many walks of life, and I had graduated just then with a master's in business and a film degree as well. So I was wanting to go down and explore that path. And I was working as a finance analyst. And then finally I got to work on a farm, and it was just one of these hats I was wearing. I thought it would just be another hat. But on the farm, I woke up to a lot of things. For one, I had no idea how many varieties of food that there were and how limited my information was on that. I didn't know that potatoes actually would grow potatoes. Like, that's what they were doing in my pantry, trying to grow with those eyes. I didn't know that you put it in the ground and it would grow. There's so many things that I didn't know about all these varieties of lemons, you name it. As I got grounded, it's kind of funny. As I got grounded, I started looking up as well, with my feet in the earth. I started looking at the skies, and I firsthand witnessed weather engineering, weather manipulation, specifically drought causation. It was very rural. I don't know how long you want me to talk about this, but I'll tell you really quick. I lived in a rural community in Northern California where the jet stream would come through, and we were 4 years into this pretty catastrophic drought for farming. The jet stream was being manipulated. I didn't know at the time. I didn't know the word geoengineering or chemtrails or any of these things, but I did witness something firsthand. And then a couple of weeks later, a friend planted the seed, perfectly timed, synchronized, serendipitously, coincidentally, maybe, but there are no coincidences. And I realized I'd witnessed something. I realized I'd witnessed a storm being quelled. And then, it started from there.
So tell us what that looked like, because I'm very curious how you could witness weather manipulation when heretofore you had no understanding of that was maybe even possible.
Well, I saw it, but I didn't know what I was seeing. Then later on, my friend and I were talking on the phone, and he was voicing his frustration about the daily chemtrails. And I was like, what is that? What is that word? And he's like, oh, you got to go look it up. And I went and looked it up and I realized I had witnessed it firsthand and had a memory, but the memory had just been tabled as like, I don't know what that is. And what I witnessed is we were expecting a week of rain, like fierce storm was coming off the ocean. And where I lived in northern rural California, I could hear the waves crashing at the farm that I worked on. That farm was primarily dry farming. We're growing, we don't have to irrigate. So we're growing squash, pumpkins, potatoes, dozen variety of potatoes. I didn't even know there were that. And there's a lot more evidently. And this storm's coming in and I'm harvesting food because it was an out of season kind of storm. We thought that the food was going to rot. The pumpkins and stuff were going to rot out in the field. And as I'm out there harvesting, and this is where we have very sparse air traffic. So I graduated, taught my class with a master's in business administration with a focus in strategic sustainability. And there I really did well in statistics. And in statistics, you play with numbers and you learn about causal relationship versus not causal. You can line up numbers and say, oh, there's this corollary. There's a correlation here. Every time I go outside with a blue shirt on, it rains. But eventually the numbers stack up. And one day I walk outside with a blue shirt on and it doesn't rain. And then it's no longer causal and it's just coincidence. And numbers stack up, right? And they make sense in that world. And that's why when I see science being twisted and manipulated and perverted and stuff like that, and like, there's a lot of things you can talk about. I mean, one thing I like to talk about is fluoride. The science behind fluoride is not even there. It's just funny. Like if you look at the numbers and stuff like that, there's not any science that says that put it in your drinking water does anything to your teeth. It doesn't have enough time to bond. It doesn't do that. It wreaks havoc on your digestive system and all these things. That's a whole nother story. The relationship that I witnessed was a regular uptick in air traffic. I'm out there every day working on the farm and there's no air traffic. It's the middle of nowhere. I'd see maybe 1 or 2 planes in a day of work. I'm working all day long in the summer, long days. And I'm witnessing the world and looking up and looking down and I'm seeing a plane or 2 fly by in the day, not a dozen showing up on the edge of a storm, but a lot of planes, an irregular occurrence. A pattern was broken. The pattern was very sparse air traffic. And then all of a sudden, all these planes were zigzagging in the sky and they were leaving these persistent linear cirrus cloud formations out of the back of the planes. Whereas the sparse air traffic that I'd seen previously didn't leave any. And then I started watching more, started to wake up and I started to really look and I realized that this was a significant occurrence and a pattern that was broken and whatnot. The storm is coming off the ocean looking like it's going to dump rain. And I literally, where I lived, it was in such a drought that these amphibious creatures like salamanders and frogs came out from underneath my house ready for this storm. It was coming, 100% chance of rain for a week. And then these planes showed up and like my farmer boss has like Doppler radar and he's like, wear your rain boots. We got to harvest all this and not lose too much of this crop. And I'm out there. And as these black storm clouds rolled in, these planes showed up and they left lines out of the back of the planes. And I didn't know anything, but come to find out after research, I learned that what was likely happening was aluminum was being left, aerosolized aluminum, which dissipates. It's the opposite of cloud seeding. If you want to seed a cloud, you put a little seed up there, a little dust particle or silver particle or something that's small that attracts water. You can have something that attracts it or repels it to make the seed to drop the rain, or you can make it not drop the rain, evidently, which aluminum will spread out the moisture and make it not rain. And so what I believe I was witnessing was the quelling of a rainstorm, creating more drought and manipulating the weather for nefarious purposes. Everyone wants to be like, why? And that's, part of why we're doing this show. But that's what got me really going. And then it took years because I went down the quote unquote rabbit hole. And what I found was a lot of not just disinformation, misinformation, but even the activism that I found. It wasn't enough that I could even share with my peers back home. Or I grew up in Washington, D.C. area. And then I moved to California. I went to Virginia Tech. I grew up in Virginia, Northern Virginia, right outside of D.C. There's a river that separates this D.C. and Virginia. And I grew up in Virginia in the suburbs. And then when I went to Virginia Tech, got a business degree. And I finally moved to California and got a master's in business. And, like I said, I had all these different walks of life. And finally I'm on a farm and I'm realizing these things. But when I started realizing that the weather was engineered, I had no resources to share with my friends. I was trying to be like, hey, you look up too. They're like, oh, share something with me. And what I had to share wasn't very good. It was kind of like one of the like movies that I wanted to share there was a portion in the movie, like a climactic portion where they're just filming a bush and it's dead. And it's like, obviously this bush is dead from the chemtrails, And I'm like, I can't share that. That's not a causal thing. That's coincidence. Right. I got a statistics degree, graduated top of my class from like one of the Cal State schools. Like, I'm like proud of it. And I'm not going to share that. It's going to make the truth look, I want to represent the truth with integrity, the integrity that it deserves.
Absolutely. And this is one reason it's perfect that you're on the show right now, because we also want to dig deep. The other thing is, Matt, we don't want people to be unnecessarily afraid, but we want them to be informed, because that's the seed of activism, right? So talk to us about some of the things you found that probably you included in your Frankenskies documentary about, for example, the weather modification patents.
Right. And also to talk about not being in fear, because all of this can be very dismantling, especially when it's new. And I recommend people do watch my film, please, Frankenskies. This came out in 2017. I really wanted it to come out in 2014, 15, but God got in the way is really all I can say. And finally, I was able to include some stuff from 2016 and the early 2017 in the movie, which was meant to be. It was all in God's hands. And what it was the launch of the media saying that we need chemtrails, aka geoengineering, as a solution to global warming. And before that, it was just a conspiracy theory crackpot thing that no one would ever talk about. And now the scientific community is saying that we need it as a solution, the spraying of our skies and dimming the sun. The information is very important. And to know how far back it goes is very important. And then to grasp it all, the patents are part of the story. And that is important. We'll have to talk about how we can be empowered by it all and the health and not be dismantled. And we'll get there. The patents, I like to tell the story like this. When the lines in the sky really started showing up in like the early 90s, because before then it was very sparse and research wasn't everywhere like it is now. The lines started showing up in the early 90s, and people before were like scratching their heads because they're like, I didn't see these lines, especially in Arizona in the desert and whatnot, where the skies are like this cobalt dark desert blue. And then all of a sudden these planes are leaving these lines where they weren't before. And this Kingman, Arizona, this community of Arizonians came together and they were like, we want to do something about this. And they wrote letters to politicians and they did a lot of research, and they found in the patents of this, because there's patents for spraying the skies for purposes like geoengineering to like slow down global warming or whatever it may be, or to seed the rain and all these different weather things. These things that are supposedly not true if you ask your politicians or whatever, or they're not true to the degree that we think they are, because they'll say, oh yeah, research, not that much. But the things that the activists, the truth-seeking people have learned to be true, there's a money trail, and there's patents for these things. There's patents for barium release rockets going back to 1970s, early 70s. And so if you do the research and look at what the patents tell the story, then you can come up with okay, these would be the chemical constituents if they were doing it. It seems like they're doing it. If they were doing it, these would be the chemical constituents. Then you test the rainwater on days where it looks like they're doing it and then it rains the next day. The activists, truthers, these people are like grandmothers and normal people. They want you to think it's tinfoil hat, crazy, homeless, crazy, insane asylum people. But these are normal soccer moms. Like, I've met them, and they're scientists and lawyers and all these sorts of nice people. And so they came together in Kingman, Arizona, about 30 of them, and they tested their blood. They tested the rainwater consistently. And they matched it up to the patents, and they're like, look, these things, and they tested even like the soil, and they're like, look, these constituents are spiking, and they're the same that are correlated in the patents for these things. And eventually it comes down to no longer like causal, like the clouds are white and fluffy and it rains the next day. You test it for aluminum, barium, strontium, cadmium, lithium, certain things, and there's nothing in them because it's clean rainwater, because of fluffy clouds. But then you see these abnormal lines in the sky and the irregular uptick in traffic of planes. And you catch a day where there's a lot of the lines, and then it rains the next day and this stuff is coming down in the rainwater, and you get it tested and it's got all these crazy spikes and things that shouldn't be there, like aluminum, barium, strontium, which are these patented things. And then if you really do your research, there's NASA program. Okay. And people don't like this answer that NASA is part of it, but they are, I'm sorry. And NASA has a budget of $80 million per day. So they have a budget of $80 million per day. And if you look up this publicly, they have a program called CARE, C-A-R-E. It's an acronym called the Charged Aerosol Release Experiment, where they make noctilucent clouds publicly. They say, yeah, we have a fleet of drones and planes and whatnot, and we spray aluminum barium strontium and make noctilucent clouds, this cloud name that they created. So they say it's aluminum barium strontium. It's in the patents, it's in the rainwater, and you kind of just have to follow it, put the pieces together on your own.
Coming up, Matt discusses the effects of the chemicals released in the sky on the health of humanity.
You're listening to the Wise Traditions podcast from the Weston A. Price Foundation. We pause now to recognize our sponsors.
Earth Runners. You've heard that earthing or grounding is great, but did you know that its benefits include reduced stress, improved sleep, synchronized circadian rhythm, countering the effects of man-made electromagnetic frequencies by connecting to the natural electromagnetic frequencies of the earth? This is one reason Earth Runners are awesome, because these sandals facilitate keeping our feet connected to the ground, which mimics exactly how our ancestors lived. It allows the body to take in electrons, which helps restore our natural electric state. Most shoes insulate and separate us from the earth, but Earth Runner sandals have a copper plug, which allows the earth's energy to reach you. Plus, their sandal design works so that you have healthy, full range of foot movement, which improves everything upstream in the body. Earth Runners aspires to restore our relationship with nature and to help us rediscover our ancestral roots via minimalist earthing sandals. Rewild and reconnect with Earth Runners. You can find them at earthrunners.com and use the code WISE for 10% off at checkout. Again, that's earthrunners.com and the code word WISE. And School of Lunch. Learn to cook the Wise Traditions way from someone who's been feeding hundreds of kids for years. I'm talking about my good friend Hillary Boynton. She is the author of the Heal Your Gut cookbook, and she is a lunch leader extraordinaire in California, where she feeds school children an ancestral-based lunch with ease. Hillary can empower you to do the same, whether you want to feed yourself, your family, your community, or school children. She holds a School of Lunch training academy that's coming up this summer, July 28th through August 2nd, and it's held in the beautiful mountains of Topanga, California. The first session for 2024 is already sold out, and there are only a few spots available for this encore session in late July. So go to schooloflunch.com to sign up now. And just for a little background, you need to know that Hillary is a mother of 5 whose life was changed by the Weston A. Price Foundation. When her children first had health issues, she dove into Nourishing Traditions by Sally Fallon Morell, and she has never looked back. Now, for the 6th time, Hillary and her team at School of Lunch are holding their successful 1-week intensive, so you can be equipped to prepare and serve up ancestral-based meals wherever you are. She will show you how. It's a win on every front. So go to schooloflunch.com and click on Training Academy. Be empowered and inspired to nourish your family and your community in new but traditional ways. That's schooloflunch.com and click on the Training Academy. This is Hilda Labrada Gore, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. So, Matt, do these people, you said something about it being nefarious reasons for which they want to do it, but do some people genuinely think, okay, yes, NASA has this program, so does the Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, these different groups have these programs, but they genuinely think it's going to be good to bring about rain in certain areas or prevent rain or natural disasters? Do they not realize that perhaps these chemicals could have an unintended consequence for the health of humanity?
Yeah, don't get me wrong with nefarious aspects. A lot of people think that they're doing good, and it's hard to wrap your head around that people at the top are maybe doing something not good. How it plays out are a lot of the people at the bottom level that are manning the drones or organizing it and whatnot, they're on a need-to-know basis. They're compartmentalized. They don't know everything. And what they do know or are being told is they're doing good, okay? Which is the world is heating up so fast because of global warming and Al Gore's movie and all that his predictions never came true. And something needs to be done to act to dim the skies by making this artificial layer of aluminum. They don't know that it might create a greenhouse effect. They don't know that it might actually be creating the problem. And it's such like an issue that people really can't grasp it all, like the why would they do that and who, what, whys, and all these things. To look at it from this perspective, there's people at high up places that do believe that global warming is a bad thing and that there needs to be action or there will be dire consequences, and that it's coming from CO2 levels from our emissions and all of that. It is up for debate. I'll be honest with that.
Mm-hmm.
We can debate it. But at the end of the debate, trust me, it results in like there shouldn't be fear to drastically do things like dim the sun, because plants and humans need sun and the stuff that's being sprayed is bad. And it could have dire consequences like creating a greenhouse effect. Remember that word, greenhouse effect? You create a layer of aluminum, the heat gets in, it can't bounce out, can't get out. And you end up creating the problem that you're trying to solve. There needs to be discussion on this. We have rights. There's like all these rights that we have, human rights, a say to our environment and environmental decisions that impact us and all that. But also there should be transparency and scrutiny. So that's really what's important here is we deserve transparency and scrutiny. If they're going to act on something and do something, then we should be in the know. Because if we're in the know, then we can take things to chelate these things and get these toxins out of our body or prevent them from being uptaken by mineralizing and whatnot. Like we should be in the know at least.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. I like the word transparency, as you were saying, and our right to know, because there's a lot of obfuscation. And I know people who say, well, no, those are simply condensation trails up in the sky. But I believe when you were making your documentary, Frankenskies, you were able to surreptitiously record some of the planes and how they would literally flip a switch and the chemical spray would start to be released. Is that right?
Well, yeah, the story of the chemtrail contrail is how they, great word, obfuscate. They muddy the waters. And
yes.
What happens is then everyone's confused by all these scientific terms and they're like, well, I'm not up there. And the facts are that generally speaking, these engines are not producing blasting hot air anymore. They were up until the 60s. And then these engines came out called the high bypass turbofan jet engine. And these things are basically like propellers, like big turbines are spinning, creating lift over wings. And that's how the planes fly. If you put the engine on the back of like an F-16 and that's pushing the plane differently, you can end up with a lot of heat, condensation trail out of the jet engine. But these normal engines that we're dealing with, there's no heat, there's no contrail at all. There's nothing that confuses people, because a lot of people are like, that's a contrail and that's a chemtrail. The short trails are also chemicals. And if you watch the sky enough, you'll see a short one side by side, a long one mixing chemicals together. You'll see a lot of things if you just start to watch the sky. And you'll also see days where there's nothing going on.
That's true. It's like they have the day off. And then I see some days where I know it's not a condensation trail. And tell me if you think this is good thinking on my part. When I see a curve in the sky of the trail, I'm like, wait, if a plane were going from point A to point B and it was a passenger plane, it would have a direct route. It wouldn't be curving as if it were changing direction. I've seen a lot of curves in the sky with these trails. And I'm like, that seems like more of almost a crop dusting effect that I'm seeing.
Definitely the curves in the sky are a good indicator. And that's great that you're looking at that. What someone would say is that they got rerouted because they were out of gas or just, something. There's always an excuse. There's always an excuse. But if you look up and trust your instincts and your intuition, you just start to watch the sky. Often you'll see planes going by with nothing at all. Then later in the day, you'll see a bunch with the short trails. That's them actually priming the sky with, I believe, barium. And then you'll see later on in the day, the trails start to stick. You'll see planes side by side, sometimes with one with nothing, one with a long trail at the same altitude. They shouldn't even be flying in each other's wakes. They shouldn't be side by side. There's a lot of things, but you're not going to be told the truth on the subject, because if you're told the truth, then people would object it. People would want transparency. They would say, why are you using nanoparticulate aluminum? It leads to Alzheimer's and dementia. You could, use sulfur or something else. There's all these things, right? I can't really answer like the exact why behind the transparency issue, aside from like, there's nefarious people behind the scenes that don't want to tell everyone the secrets. I mean, It's call it national security. I mean, if you watch my movie, it's a chronological timeline, and everyone I recommend, please, it should be seen. It's not about me. It's not my voiceover. I'm not hardly even in the movie. The movie starts off in 1920s, goes through the historical chronological timeline of weather engineering. By the time the Ho Chi Minh Trail is being flooded in Vietnam, Operation Popeye, by the time the weather warfare has been perfected in Vietnam in the 60s, it's self-evident that it is a sharpened tool of the U.S. military industrial complex. They don't want the world to know, crazy, I know it sounds crazy, they can create drought and earthquakes in Iran. They can do these things to their enemies, but they don't want everyone to know. They don't want it common knowledge. Okay. But there's things on U.S. soil that need to be discussed. For instance, back in the 60s and 70s, it was common knowledge that cloud seeding existed. Farmers could even seed the clouds as it came by with not just silver, but what the crops needed. Your crops need phosphorus or potassium. You could seed the clouds with that. That's how common knowledge. You'd have rain coming down with minerals in it. That's how common knowledge it was. And now it's been swept under the rug. So people are just praying for rain. Forest fires come and people are praying for rain. There's no conversation about we can make rain. We can steer the jet stream and all these stories that need to be discussions that need to be had, especially in instances of drought and fires.
Yes, that's such a good point. Now, going back to your original movie, and I want to get to Frankenskies too in a moment, but going back to the first documentary you made, what was one of the most surprising facts that you learned as you started to uncover and do some of these deep dives into this information?
How far along it's been going. I couldn't believe that it had been going on since the 1920s and documented, filmed and documented by the U.S. Air Force. Like, this is how we do it. It's so self-evident. Like, anybody watching Frankenskies, once you get 10, 15 minutes in, it clicks. If these resources were available and they were sharpening their tools and honing in on the technology, may it be black ops, top secret, whether that or not, the technology is there to quell hurricanes, to make hurricanes, to steer hurricanes, to make drought, to steer jet streams. All these things were readily available a near century ago. To think that it's mum now and we talk about things like, oh, climate change and the weather's so bad that we need to push things like 15-minute cities, take away rights, and push you into, I mean, like, there's a lot of things happening that like blaming cows. If you see the writing on the wall regarding where the world is going, it seems like not all of the truth is being told while our rights are being stripped away. And there's look at carbon like it's so nefarious. But if you look at the bigger picture, starting in the 1990s, a lot of aluminum is being sprayed in the sky. When frequencies are manipulated like HARP and whatnot with their technology that they utilize, they use intersecting radio waves. When you put something in the microwave oven, they use intersecting microwaves to oscillate the water molecules to heat your food. Okay. It's intersecting microwaves, radio waves that are clashing into each other in your food. That exact same technology, intersecting radio waves, intersecting microwaves, is utilized in the atmosphere. You can even see the ripples. The chemtrails would go into a haze, and then when they flip it on, there's these ripples, and that's the creation of heat to create high pressure to steer around. When you watch the Weather Channel and you see the storms moving around, there's H's and L's. L's are low pressure, cold air. H's are high pressure, hot air rising. If you can create those H's, create the high pressure, you can steer jet streams, move things around, steer the whole weather systems if you can create high pressure systems where you want. And when they do that, they spray the aluminum, they heat it up with intersecting radio waves in the atmosphere, microwave the atmosphere to near the temperature of the sun. They're heating up the sky to near the temperature of the sun to steer around weather patterns. All right. And they're creating a blanket of metal, creating a greenhouse effect. If they've been doing this since the 90s and they're saying this word global warming without being transparent about that, and they're going, oh, heat wave here, oh, this, that, there. But they're not saying that maybe a geoengineering chemtrail project was going on at the same exact time, making it 120 degrees. And then they're saying, oh, we need to do something about that. The solution is geoengineering, dimming your skies with aluminum. The truth of the story is not being told. It seems like that they're using lies to prop up more lies to get us convinced that need a solution that's their solution. I have never heard of a tree planting campaign. Like if the real problem was our carbon emissions, there would be global tree planting campaigns. Like I've yet to hear about it. I've heard about taxes on potentially
Right.
taxing me for having a home garden, all these other things. Please.
I just wanted to say, or supporting these regenerative farms that are sequestering carbon in magnificent amounts. But no, all the talk is kind of scapegoating the cow, pun intended. Like, why are you scapegoating the cow? And scapegoating us, telling us that we need to all drive electric cars, when in truth, what they are touting as a solution is actually causing a lot of the problems. But I wanted to ask you also, Matt, what are you revealing in Frankenskies 2 that you didn't cover in the original documentary?
The first one's very empowering and encouraging. It's not one of those things that leave you. So every time I do a podcast or watch anything on the subject, it's easy to tell where someone's heart is based on where they put you in the end. If you're stuck in a place of fear and you're frozen, you don't know what to do with yourself, then that's not honoring the truth with integrity. Okay. Mm-hmm. You need to wrap it all up and be able to empower that person. In Frankenskies 1, there's speeches and empowerment through the interviews. And I went to politicians' homes in Canada and interviewed indigenous tribes and different people that were empowering through the truth. But I didn't hone in on exactly what people can do necessarily. Like we walk away from Frankenskies empowered, not in the frequency of fear. And that's I'm proud of. And I'm thankful that we were able to get that out there in 2017. Frankenskies 2 is going to talk about how we can hone in on ourselves and not be a victim to any of it and to actually see it for what it is. Some of these topics can be a little dismantling and you don't even want to really address them. It's like there's all of these things that we have to be worried about. Let's focus on the good things in life and the good of people and all that, right? But there is something happening. There's plastic in our clothing and our water and our food and our air seems to be under attack, right? And we have to manage these things and not take the medical mafia's this and that and have to weigh these waters of deceit, right? Otherwise, we'd be taking Adderall and Tylenol and Xanax all day long if we just listened to all that stuff. I mean, just like it's much easier and better to be natural and to walk this path. But it's important to take a step back and to be like, why is the food under attack, the water, the weather, the air, the children's future, our sunlight, right? It's because that there's a very small group of greedy, money grubbing families or whatever you want to call them. There's a very small group of people that are terrified of us truly waking up and seeing it for what it is and coming into our true powers. And they're so afraid of that they'll taint everything and try to dismantle us through media and everything and control our frequency. And to see it for what it is and embrace that they're so afraid of us coming into our true powers of truth, right? So what's the truth? How can we flip the chemtrails on their heads? Well, we're being rained down with toxic metals. But do we really need to absorb these things and worry about them? No. If we're walking around totally sick and mineral deficient, then our body wants to get the minerals up to speed. So we don't have the magnesium we need in our bones and the calcium we need in our bones. And then all of a sudden, there's radioactive cadmium from the chemtrails in the air. And we absorb that because it's close on the periodic table, cadmium and calcium. They're kind of close. And so we get something bad in our bones that we didn't even need because we're living unhealthy lifestyles. Healthy self is heal thyself if you break down the word. And it's really up to us.
I love that.
Yeah. And it's up to us to honor it. I mean, like understand what grounding is, understand what a strict rhythm is, understand what wheatgrass is, what organic is and why. The reason why organic even exists is because activists got involved. But why? It's because conventional food was getting sprayed with toxins, poison, like glyphosate. Like the reason why they had to GMO the food is the glyphosate would make the food shrivel up and die. You don't want to ingest something that would make your food die, right? So then activists got involved and they put their necks out there and they fought and now things are labeled for us. And then if we honor the truth and honor ourselves, we can plant and grow and do things that are in alignment with that and honor the farmers and all these sort of things. Mineralizing and learning about minerals and taking in bioavailable plant-based minerals and learning about what our bodies can actually ingest and learning about how to honor ourselves and to not take things that will strip minerals like big pharma's type stuff, but to get in a regimen where we're mineralizing our bodies, then we're not even absorbing the toxins from the toxic environment. So we need like 120 minerals each day. And I mean, I can't even read off a dozen of them. One of them is Einsteinium. And they're not putting gold and palladium and silver and Einsteinium in your soil. It takes nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium NPK. It takes like 3 things to grow your food. They're not putting in all these extra things in the soil. The soil's depleted, and it's up to us to learn how to get these things in our system. I learned about sea moss, and then I ended up taking this sea moss supplement that has sea moss, bladderwrack, and burdock. And by taking in these 3 things, it's a root and 2 seaweeds. Sea moss is just a seaweed. And it gets me these 120 bioavailable plant-based minerals that I need. Okay. I get up to speed on my minerals, then my body's not absorbing toxins from the environment, trying to get the minerals that I need. So if I honor myself, honor my body, honor what I intake, and I'm not taking in bad media. And also, like, you learn about EMF, and I have a whole EMF protection clothing line, a whole that thing that I did there, but you learn about mitigating your exposure to toxins. And it's like a lot of these truths, they want to muddy the truths and make it seem like you don't need to pay attention to these things and trust the scientists and trust the specialists and trust Google and listen to the white suited doctors and don't, trust your intuition or go down these quote rabbit holes. And they call these other things conspiracy theorists and all these things, but there's toxins in our world. We need to learn to mitigate this toxic world, wade these waters of deceit. There's a lot of amazing, beautiful things in this world. And we live in duality, it seems. So there's just as much beauty in the world. We just have to focus on it. But a lot of things, they're in our power, and it's up to us to be empowered and to embrace these things and to not shrivel up in fear and to not honor yourself. So many people are say, oh, I'm going to die anyways. I'll just eat the pepperoni pizza and drink the beer. And who cares about fluoride and all this stuff? It's like, look, if there's fluoride in your water, you can do something about it. You can get a charcoal filter, and then it's not in your shower, and then it's not in the chlorine. You're not taking it in your lungs. There's things that you can do to honor the truth with integrity. And those synthetic vitamins, really quick, throw your synthetic vitamins in the trash. They're not plant-based. They're not doing anything for you. They're probably bogging down your system. There's things. So I have a website, actualactivists.com, and on there I have a daily truth. Every day it's something. Juicing wheatgrass does this, or ditch your peanut butter because it's rancid, or oils, cooking with the right oils. And people say, oh, that didn't make me sick. I feel fine. It's because your body's used to it. Okay. Thank you.
No, that's great, Matt. We are on the same page for so many of these things that you mentioned. Like our people that want to show up as their healthiest, most sun-kissed, most grounded, most nourished people, so that they can be strong and they are empowered. And that's one reason I like, actually, one of the phrases I think I've seen on your Instagram account is real eyes, realize, realize. So when we are strong, we have the eyes to see what's going on around us. And we also have the strength and the resilience to withstand it and actually do something about it. Activism is one of the branches of the Weston A. Price Foundation. So I'm excited to say we will steer people to your movie. I will definitely say, put in the show notes some of the links to your resources. Absolutely. And now I want to pose to you the question I love to pose at the end of the show. If the listener could just do one thing to improve their health or to shore up their health, what would you recommend that they do?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. And I have the answer to that question. And I love my response. Firstly, I want to say, I love that you said that. Realize, real, all of that. It's a beautiful quote. Also, I like to take it a step further and say, real eyes, realize, real skies. So you start to look up and you can see the truth for what it is. And you can open up your consciousness and see that beautiful blue, cobalt, fluffy cloud days. And those are your real skies. And you can see those days that are not. And I like to focus my energy on bringing the truth forward with people. I don't like to bring up the chemtrails as much. I like to bring up those beautiful days in between. Say, look at this beautiful day. It wasn't like this yesterday. Look at how beautiful this is. Let's go out and enjoy it. The answer to your question is, and this is the biggest thing that I ever did with my life, and I know a lot of people do this, but you can do it even more, is knowing your inputs. I mean, reading your ingredients is the first step, but also honoring your inputs in so many ways. I mean, the programming is deep through the things that you ingest, through the media, the people that you surround yourself with, and the foods that you ingest. And some people are like, well, I just have that one vice, it's Diet Pepsi or whatever. It's like, then get it out of your life. Honor yourself It's 2024, people. The time is now. A lot of people, they're like, read your ingredients. If you can't read it, don't eat it. And do the research. If you're going to put that thing in your body, do some research on it. Find the narrative, find the counter narrative, find what you feel is actually the real information. I can find a lot of research saying Coca-Cola, it's more healthy than water even. There's Coca-Cola funded research that says that it's more hydrating than water. And you got to be able to wade these waters of deceit, dig around and find out what you're ingesting and feeding your children. Okay. And it doesn't have to be, oh, I'm a crazy conspiracy theorist. It's like, no, aspartame is toxic for a lot of reasons. And it was banned for so many reasons. And then finally it was not banned, but it took all these rounds going through the FDA, banned, it's toxin, it's a neurotoxin, it's banned in all these countries. And if you're handing your child bubblegum with aspartame in it, you're not honoring yourself or anybody really. And there's little things that you can do. And the ingredients are your first step. I feel that it's a very much bigger picture spiritual battle, and owning your physical being, owning your physical vessel so that you can vibrate high enough to own a high vibration, to resonate with your higher purpose and your soul and all that sort of stuff. It starts with your input, and that starts with reading your ingredients. And if you don't even know what that thing is, then look it up. You have a smartphone in your pocket probably. And if you don't, that's great. Go home, look it up.
I love it. Matt, thank you so much for your time today. This has been really, really a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. And I appreciate you. And I look forward to further delves into all this. And thanks for caring.
Our guest today was Matt Landman. Check out his websites, actualactivists.com, frankenskies.com, or spirogear.com to learn more. And I am Hilda Labrada Gore, the host and producer of this podcast for the Weston A. Price Foundation. You can find me at holistichilda.com. And for the transcript for this episode, visit our website, westonaprice.org, and click on the podcast page. And follow the Wise Traditions podcast on your favorite podcast app. That way you won't miss a thing when new episodes are released. And share your favorite interviews with friends. This helps us get the word out in a more personal way. And thank you so much for listening, my friend. Stay well, and remember to keep your feet on the ground and your face to the sun.
On behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation, thanks for listening. We have many free resources to support you on your health journey. Visit westonaprice.org to find podcasts, articles, videos, and more. You can also find a local chapter near you for help in finding sources of great food. We invite you to support the Foundation's mission of education, research, and activism by becoming a member. Thanks again, and take care. Wise Traditions is a project of the Weston A. Price Foundation for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. The content on this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professional. It is not intended to be, nor does it constitute healthcare or medical advice.